Greetings and welcome. We are in Freshman Honors English, and today our objective is to continue working with Romeo and Juliet. We are on page 818 of your hymnal, and we're working with 1-3. More particularly, the exchange that will happen here between Juliet, her mother, and the nurse. Okay, so we're going to kind of watch this. Notice right away that Juliet is going to be made embarrassed by the nurse. We want to recognize what we will call, for your notes, character development. And Shakespeare will in fact develop this character, the nurse. She's an interesting lady. She likes to talk. She likes to hear herself talk. She could have probably been an English teacher. And on top of it, she will say things that are kind of embarrassing, and let's just say it out loud, a little bit crude. Not maybe even a little bit, a lot. So you're going to see this kind of type of crude joking. She sees it as all funny. Of course, Juliet, it seems, is more embarrassed that she's saying this in front of Juliet's mother, right? It's like, come on, nurse. In other words, there's a relationship Juliet and the nurse have that, normally will not be in evidence so easily when we're talking about Juliet with her mother. Again, the relationship between Juliet and her mother is an interesting one. Let's put it in your notes with the adjective simply formal. It's a very formal relationship. It is not informal. It is not close. It's not like, oh, Mom, this kind of thing. There's a different kind of relationship between Juliet and the nurse than there is between Juliet and her mom. Okay, here we go. We're going to go ahead and listen to the scene. I want you to pay close attention back and forth to the way in which Mom ultimately is going to get to the point. Namely, Daddy's going to set you up with a husband. I hope you're ready to go. To which Juliet, again, will finish this little brief scene by saying, I'll look to like, if looking like you move. And we debated this, I believe, last week. Do girls look at the physical attributes of the guy and then make the decision whether they like the guy or not? All right, here we go. Let's listen to it.
By my maidenhead of 12-year-old, I bear her come. What lamb? What ladybird? God forbid. Where's this girl? What, Juliet?
Oh, no.
Your mother?
Madam, I'm here. What is the will?
This is the matter. Nurse, just leave a while. We must talk in secret first. Nurse, come back again. I have remembered me up here, Star. Now, nurse, my daughter's of a pretty age.
Faith, I can tell her age unto an hour.
She's not 14.
I laid 14 of my teeth, and yet to my teen made spoken I have but 4. She is not 14. How long is it now to Lammas time?
A fortnight and odd days.
Even or odd, of all days in the year, come Lammas Eve at night, shall she be 14. Susan and she, God rest all Christian souls, were of an age. Well, Susan is with God. She was too good for me. But as I said, on Lammas Eve at night shall she be 14. That shall she marry, I remember it well. That is since the earthquake now 11 years. And she was mean, I never shall forget it, of all days of the year from that day. But I then laid wormwood to my dog, sitting in the sun under the dove-house wall. My lord and you were then at Mantua. Nay, I do bear a broken. But as I said, when did you taste the wormwood on the nipple of my dog and felt it bitter, pretty fool? To see attention him fall out with the dog. Shake, quoth the dove-house, 'twas no need I trout a bit me trudge. And since that time it is 11 years. For then she would stand high alone. Nay, by the wood she could have run and waddled all about. For even the day before she broke her brow. And then my husband, God, with his soul he was a merry man, took out the child. Yea, quoth he, does they fall upon thy face? Then would fall backward when thou hast more wit. Was there not you? And by my holly then the pretty wretch left crying and said, Aye, to see now how a jest should come about. I warrant, and I should live 1,000 years, and never should forget it. Wilt thou not, you, quoth he, a pretty
Oh, now this is Freddie. Hold that, please.
Yes, madam, and I cannot choose but laugh to think it leave crying and say, and yet I warrant it had upon its brow of bumpers because the young cockle was stolen, a perilous knock and described bitterly. Yea, quoth my husband forced upon thy face, thou wilt fall backward when thou comest to age.
You can see the language, right? Get the joke.
And said I.
Thou too art pretty mess.
She's like, would you shut up?
God mercy to his grace. There was the prettiest babe that ever I heard, and I might live to see thee married once. I held my breath.
Marry. That marry is the very theme I came to talk of. Tell me, daughter Juliet, how stands your disposition to be married?
It is an honor that I dream not of.
Honor. Were not I thine only nurse, I would say thou hadst such wisdom from thy teeth.
Well, think of marriage now. Younger than you, here in Verona, ladies of esteem are made already mothers. By my count, I was your mother much upon these years that you are now a maid. Thus then, in brief, the valiant Paris seeks you for his love.
One man, you lady, it is a man of all the world. Why, he's a man of wax.
Verona's summer hath not such a flower.
He's a flower, he's a very flower.
What say you? Can you love the gentleman? This night we shall behold him at our feast. Read all the volume of young Paris' face and find delight writ there with beauty's pen. Examine every married lineament and see how one another lends content. And what obscured in this fair volume lies, find written in the margent of his eyes. This precious book of love, this unbound lover, to beautify him only lacks a cover. The fish lives in the sea, and 'tis much pride for fair without, the fair within to hide. That book in many's eyes doth share the glory that in gold clasps locks in the golden story. So shall you share all that he doth possess, by having him, making yourself no less.
No less, they figure women grow by men.
Speak briefly. Can you like a Paris love?
I look to like, if looking liking move. But no more deep will I dart mine eyes, and your consent give strength to make it fly.
Madam, the guests are come, supper served up, you called, my young lady asked for, the nurse cursed in the pantry, and everything in extremity. I must hence to wait. I beseech you, follow straight.
We follow thee. Juliet, the Countess stays.
Oh, girls, seek happy nights to happy days.
It's interesting for your notes that Juliet's 2 points. Juliet's mother speaks about her not only marrying, but being a mother. Did you notice this? She actually says it out loud. There are girls younger than you in Verona of high esteem who are already mothers. She will even say of herself, I was a mother by the age of 13, which obviously, creates some real questions about what's the right age to become a mom? Is 12 or 13 too young to be a mother, you see? Kind of, in our mind, we're like, seriously? I think, Miss Winter, go ahead.
But then people didn't live as long as they do now, correct?
That's right, you're right. And, of course, this is a reason why a lot of young girls who got married and then got pregnant and tried to have children, they couldn't survive bearing the children. In other words, the actual process of being born. Many of these young girls died. The second thing I want to say for your notes is that lots of students are really surprised when Romeo and Juliet decide so quickly to get married. But why should, given this exchange we just heard, why should we not be too shocked if the two kids decide to run off and get married really quickly? It's already been set up. Notice this conversation ostensibly is not asking if Juliet can marry Paris, but rather setting her up to make sure that she does marry Paris, right? Notice Juliet will say in the lines we've been quoting, I'll look to like if looking like he moved, but look what she says next. But no more deep will I endart mine eye, than your consent gives strength to make it fly. Put it in your own words, what she just said. How about it, Seidel? What did she just say? Explain it to me. One more time.
She's like, oh.
I'll no more deep will I endart mine eye, top of page 821, then your consent gives strength to make it fly. What is consent? She's saying what to her mother?
I'll not look harder than you want me to.
Right. In other words, whatever you tell me to do, that's what I'm going to do. Which seems to suggest this is a done deal. In other words, Juliet is ostensibly already spoken for when she goes. But wait a minute. Mom says, come to the party tonight and do what in regards to Paris? Meet him for the first time. So in other words, we're not talking about a long dating relationship. Mom wants her to go to the party so she can see Paris and then fall in love, blah, 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 blah. The irony, of course, is, even to say it, I noticed my Freudian slip. Obviously, we know what's about to happen. She will go to the party. She will go, ironically, for the same reason that Romeo goes. Right? They are right. They are both going to the party for the same reason. Not to meet each other, but to see the one they either love or are supposed to love. Right? Ironically, of course, when they see each other here in a few seconds on stage, all of those plans go out the window in a second. Notice we'll come back now to this scene in the street, and we'll watch Romeo and Benvolio have a brief exchange now. Only we are, notice on page 821, right? We are now later in the evening, and we're ready to meet major player of our play, Mercutio. Let's write his name down. Mercutio comes from the word what? Does anyone know? What planet is named? Mercury, right. What is significant about naming Mercutio Mercury?
He's got a war.
He's what?
Got a war.
Okay, in what way? He loves to fight. What does this tell you about his personality?
He's violent.
He's very violent. But let's also point out, he's a very emotional cat. So, for example, here in a little bit, he and Romeo are going to get into a little bit of bantering. What is bantering? When friends make fun of friends. In other words, it's not nasty, it's kind of good fun and games, right? Mercutio's going to kind of make fun of Romeo. And Romeo's going to say something about having a bad dream last night. And then in the famous speech by Mercutio, the Queen Mab speech, Mercutio talks about why we dream and the kinds of strange dreams that we have. He's going to give some interesting observations about that. I want you to follow very closely now the language, and I want you to make sure that you're staying up, reading again, word for word. Here we go.
So shall we on without date is out of such prolixity. We'll have no Cupid hoodwinked with a scarf, bearing a tortoise painted bow of love, scaring the ladies like a crow keeper. Although without book prologue, faintly spoke after the trumpet for our entrance, but let the next rest my paper, we'll measure them, and be gone. Give me a tortoise. I am not for this ambling being, but heavy I will bear the light.
Nay, gentle Romeo, we must have you down.
Not I believe me. You have dancing shoes with nimble soles. I have a soul of lead so stakes me to the ground I cannot move.
What a lover, but on Cupid's wings, and soar with them above a common bound.
I am too sore and pierced with his shafts to soar with his light feathers, and so bound I cannot bound a pitch above dull woe. Under love's heavy burden do I sink.
And to sing in it should you burden love. Too great oppression for a tender thing.
Is love a tender thing? It is too rough, too rude, too boisterous, and it pricks like thorns.
If love bear up with you, bear up with love. Prick love for pricking and your beat love down. Give me a case to put my visit in. A visor for a visor, for the dear eyes on the curious side, here are the beetle brown shall fly.
Knock on it, I no sooner in, but every man will take into his legs. Swords for me! Let wantons like of heart tickle the senseless rushes with their heels. For I am proper to the grandsire phrase. I'll be a candle holder and look on. The game was ne'er so fair, and I am done.
What does it mean to say, I am done? What is he telling his pals? They're standing right outside the door. They're about to go into the party, and Romeo says, I'm done. They say, let's go in, we're going to crash this party. Do you know what that means, to crash the party? Yeah, you know that you're really not invited. You're just going to show up and see how long you can last. Notice what was just said. We're going to see how long we last, and then we may have to bolt. We may have to run, right? Our legs will have to carry us. Romeo says, I'm not going to dance because I'm too heavy. The shaft of love, Cupid, has shot me in the heart. I don't feel like dancing. And then he says, I'm done. What does that mean, I am done?
I don't want to do this.
I don't want to do this. I'll go with you guys if I have to. They're trying to convince him. You get a sense they've been over this territory before with Romeo. This is the kind of guy that he is. It's like, seriously, we're going to do this again? Watch.
The constable's own word. If thou art done, we'll draw thee from the mire, or save your reverence loved, wherein thou sticks up to the ears. Come, we burn daylight. Oh, nay, that's not so. I mean, sir, in delay, we waste our lights in vain. Lights, by day. Oh. Take our good meeting, for our judgment sits 5 times a night, once in our fine wits.
And we mean well in going to this mask. But 'tis no wit to go.
Why, may one ask?
I dreamt a dream tonight.
And so did I.
And now we're going to get into this whole thing of dreaming, okay? And in the process of this debate about what it means to dream, I want you to listen to what Mercutio has to say about the origin of dreams. All right, here we go.
Dreamers often lie.
They that sleep while they do dream things true.
Oh, the nighty queen mad have been with you. She is the fairest of Romeo and Juliet. Comes in shape no bigger than an agate stone on the forefinger of an organ. Drawn with the little atomies over men's noses as they lie asleep. Her wagon spokes made of long spinner's legs, the colour of the wings of grasshoppers, her traces of the smallest spider's web, her collars of the moonshine's watery beams, her whip of cricket's bone, the lash of film. Her wagoner a small grey-coated gnat, not half so big as a round little worm pricked from the lazy finger of a nail. Her chariot is an empty hazelnut, made by the joiner squirrel, old Grub, time out of mind the fairest coachmakers. And in this state she gallops night by night through lovers' brains, and then they dream of love. On courtiers' knees that dream on curtsies straight, or lawyers' fingers who straight dream on fees. Or ladies' lips who straight on kisses dream, which oft be angry and mad with bristless legs, because their breath with sweetmeats tainted are. Sometimes she gallops on a courtier's nose, and then dreams he is smelling out a soup. And sometimes comes she with a tied pig's tail, tickling a parson's nose as he lies asleep, then he dreams of another than it is. Sometimes she drive before a soldier's neck, and then dreams he of cutting foreign throats, of breeches, ambuscados, of Spanish blades, of pelts 5 fathom deep. And then anon drums in his ear, which he starts and wakes from being that dragon, swears a prayer and he sleeps again. This is that very man that cracks the manes of horses in the night, and bakes the elf locks in foul sluttish hairs, which once untangled much misfortune bows. This is the hag, when maids lie on their backs, that dresses them and learns them first to bear, making them women of good character.
Peace, Mercutio, peace, thou talkst of nothing.
No, I talk of dreams, which are the children of an idle brain, because of nothing but vain fantasy, which is the spin of substance of the air, and falling constant of the wind, who moves even now the frozen bosom of the north, and being angered, cuts away from thence, turning his sides to the dew-dropping sun.
This wind you talk of blows it from ourselves. Somebody's done it, we shall come too late.
Watch this.
For my mind misgives, some consequence yet hanging in the stars shall bitterly begin his fearful date with this night's revels, and expire the term of a despised life closed in my breast by some vile forfeit of untimely death. But he that hath the steerage of my course direct my sail, on lusty gentlemen!
Now, one of the things that's interesting about this little speech, and if I had more time, I'd go into it, but one of the things that's interesting is at the very end, Benvolio says, guys, enough with the talk. We got to hurry and get to the party. We're like burning daylight will be the phrase used a bit earlier. Notice that Romeo says, I don't think we're coming too early, I don't think we're coming too late. I think we're coming too early. Look what he says. I fear too early, for my mind misgives some consequence, yet hanging in the stars. Now, wait a minute. We've heard about stars, haven't we? Remember about stars? Where did we hear about stars already in this play? Right, at the prologue at the beginning of the play. Remember, they were called star-crossed lovers. Do you remember what we meant when we said this thing about stars? Do you recall that? That the idea is your future or your destiny is somehow determined. Let's make a quick note of it. So in the history of thought, there's kind of two views of this. One view says that human beings have the ability to make their choices in life. It's what we will sometimes call free will, or sometimes referred to simply as the word agency. The idea is you have a choice. You get to decide. So for example, your sitting in this room, for example, is contingent on a choice that you made. Some of you are asking, what was I thinking? Last spring when you said, I'm going to go ahead, sign up and take this class. In other words, you made a choice. You could have chosen otherwise, and guess what? You would be sitting in a different room right now. You wouldn't be listening to this lecture. You made the choice. That's one view. The opposite view is the view that we will call, for your notes, determinism. Determinism. Now this, in philosophic language, is what we call it, determinism. Now this view says the following. There is no choice in the universe. It's a myth. It's made up. The notion of agency or free will is kind of a contrivance. We'd like to think of it as being actual, but it's not. And the word picture that's often used is this. If a baseball could talk out loud, right? So somebody picks the baseball up and throws it. As the baseball's flying through the air and the baseball could talk out loud, the baseball might say something like, boy, I'm glad I choose to fly through the air. But you would say to the baseball, no way, wrong answer. The baseball does not choose anything regardless of what a baseball thinks it's choosing. In the end, the baseball will land because of laws of nature, and it has nothing to do whatsoever with the baseball's choice. Now, for those of us who say, I don't like an idea like that, the determinists will ask a very interesting question. What in your life is actually freely chosen? For example, you didn't choose to be born. You didn't choose the color of your hair or the color of your eyes at birth. You can change these things later, but not at birth. Think of it this. You didn't choose the language that you were taught from the time you were born. You didn't choose in the first year of your life the food that you were given. You didn't choose, oh, wait a minute, in the first year of my life, I didn't choose anything. Everything was given to me, and I simply adopted it. But wait a minute, as I got older, surely I chose things. Well, think of it this way. All of the stuff that you chose was contingent upon choices that were forced on you, right? So, for example, I could choose which book I was going to read at night before I went to bed. Right, out of a range of books chosen for you. So you had 20 books or more, some of you, obviously more than that, by virtue of your sitting in an honors English class, the likelihood is really high. You read a lot when you were a kid. But those books were all there for you. I could go to the library and choose my own book. Whoa, whoa, whoa. But who chose the books in the library? Are you saying those are all the books in the whole wide world? No, we know that's not true. Wait a minute. Now all of a sudden this deterministic argument says about anything that you do or are, it was kind of a choice made before you even were aware. Somebody else had a choice that kind of forced it onto you. Of course, we can continue. The scientists in the room will say, oh yeah, then there's this thing called genetics. Where I am, by and large, what my genetic composition is, I didn't choose any of that. My DNA is not something I choose. My DNA is something I'm born with. Now the question becomes, dude, how much choice do you have about anything? Now, of course, part of this discussion is a theological one, so let's include that as well. We want to be inclusive in our observations philosophically. There is, of course, this whole notion about the belief in deity or deities. The Greeks, of course, invented in many ways this discussion. If you believe in some kind of deity, God or gods, then the obvious question is, to what degree does that deity basically determine the outcome of your life? In other words, do you actually have choices at all? Or are these choices already kind of determined for you? Now, in another play that Shakespeare writes called King Lear, the question here is almost like, is your life kind of like a board game where you're a piece on the board, but the outcome of that board game has already been predetermined? everything about your life totally predetermined, and all you're doing is kind of like going through a play where the script has already been given to you, and you're just kind of acting out that play. Now, the question that we'll ask about Shakespeare is, well, is he a determinist or is he free will? So, for example, what does the line mean? Look at it again. I fear too early. I'm on 824. Romeo's final lines of this scene. I fear too early, for my mind misgives some consequence, yet hanging in the stars, shall bitterly begin its fearful date with this night's revels, and expire the term of a despised life. Put it in your own words. What did he just say?
Something bad is going to happen.
I have a feeling something bad's about to happen. One or two of us have said that. I have a feeling something. Now the question obviously is, wait a minute, is that something bad that's about to happen something that is beyond your control or no? Keep reading. Romeo says, closed in the terms of a despised life, closed in my breast by some vile forfeit of untimely death. Whoa, what did you just read? He says, I have a bad feeling that what? Something is going to happen tonight that will lead to my untimely death.
Oh, well then.
You just totally
Right,
sold the entire
right. Now, wait a minute.
How does
We know how the play ends, right? But if you were coming to this play for the first time to see it, you don't know how the play ends, and you hear Romeo say, I got a bad feeling. Something bad's going to happen tonight that will ultimately lead to my untimely death. It's altogether possible that when you then see Romeo and Juliet meet, fall in love, you're like, oh, he was totally wrong. He had a bad feeling, but it proved to be not such a bad feeling after all. In other words, it was actually wrong. By the end of the play, you come back to this line and you go, oh, wait a minute, what does that mean when a writer gives us a little insight into what's coming? Good, let's write it down at 2B. This is kind of foreshadowing. Butterfield, go.
You said that they didn't know how the play was going to end, but in the prologue, don't they?
You're absolutely right. You'd have to be paying close attention, though, wouldn't you? Right? To hear those lines at the beginning of the prologue when, you're right, we're told that they're not only star-crossed lovers, but ultimately, that's right, they're going to take their own lives. This is a play that ends with two people committing suicide. Keep reading. Notice what he says. But he, Romeo says, but he that hath the steerage of my course, direct my sail. Wait a minute, put it in your own words in your notes. See what I'm doing. I'm teaching you how to read through the language. Baumstark, what does this mean? He that hath the steerage of my course, direct my sail. Sail? What does that even mean? What's the word picture here? And steerage. You got it, a boat. Now, what's that all about? He that hath the steerage. That means the pilot of my boat.
God.
Fate. Good. Let's write this. The F word down is fate. In philosophy, the F word is actually the word fate. It's part of our discussion then of this whole debate about whether you have a choice or not. Note the irony. Romeo says, I got a bad feeling that if I go into this party right now, something's going to happen. I'm going to get jacked too early in my life. I'm going to die. But I'm going to rely on he that hath the steerage of my course. Who's he talking about?
God.
He is. He's saying, but God will take care of everything. I'm just going to go. Which seems to suggest, wait a minute, is Romeo ultimately going to blame God? And will viewers of this play blame God? Or did he have a choice? Well, yeah, he did have a choice. That's the whole point. He could have walked away from the door. He decides not to wait. Look what he says. Oh, on lusty gentlemen, in other words, hey, you know what? Forget about my bad feeling. Let's go have a good time. We'll go to the party. Of course, now we'll get to the party. Let's talk about the party real quickly. We are in 1-5. Let's talk about it really quickly. What happens in 1-5? Several important things, but let's get to it. Let's call it just really 3 things. 1-5. 1. The first thing that's going to happen in this really, really famous scene is that Romeo's going to meet Juliet. He's going to see her, and then he's going to meet her. Now, let's make sure in your notes that it's said that way. 1, he sees her. 2, he meets her. He literally walks up to her at the party, on the dance floor, and he will speak a small number of words to her. And by the end of these small number of words, he's got her. Number 2. While this is happening, we're going to have a potential major fight occur. between Tybalt, who we've already met. Remember, what is the word that he hates?
Peace.
Peace. He hates the word peace. Tybalt is ready to kill Romeo. It will be, ironically, underline the word ironically, Juliet's dad that will say to Tybalt, don't mess around with our party. Besides that, how much, I mean, really? It's a young kid. How much pain can he cause our family? Leave him alone.
Isn't Romeo old?
Of course, the irony is, well, Romeo's not that old. I mean, he's older than Juliet, but he's not that old. But the point that's made here is Juliet's dad does not see any potential problem from Romeo. What's the irony of that? You got it. The meeting on the dance floor will ultimately lead to his daughter's death. Now, there's going to be a lot of water under the bridge that's got to happen first. 3, finally, at the end of this important scene, Romeo and Juliet figure out they belong to the 2 different houses of the Capulets and the Montagues. And in that moment, Juliet will say something really fascinating as she gets to the end. My only love sprung from my only hate is an interesting continuation of this hyperbole or paradox we were talking about before. Of course, it seems to legitimate this notion that these kids don't really have much choice in terms of who they fall in love with, which again is a major part of this discussion about determinism. So, in the end, if you ever do fall in love, is that a choice that you make?
Yeah.
Or is that rather something that, quote unquote, just happens that way? And to that degree, can you fall out of love intentionally? Can you make yourself not fall in love? Can you do that? All of these are questions of 1-5. All right, here we go. Follow along quickly. Go, Saito.
I will have this to be.
Okay, wait, I got this.
Okay.
So how come, like, she didn't know, like...
She who?
Juliet.
Got it.
Wasn't for sure, like, that Romeo wasn't a different family?
Right.
Like, because she doesn't know Paris, but they're from the same family.
Right.
So their family must not be very close?
Well, this is a great question. What is the relationship between the family members, right? There's 2 things we should say about this. 1, hello, this is important. These are really wealthy people. So they live in regards to relationships with money. Got me? So many of these family members, maybe you don't know a lot about. The second thing we should say is Juliet is young. You get almost the sense this is her first party. It's almost like her coming out party. So in other words, some of the people who are here, she may be meeting for the very first time.
Okay.
Because she's been kind of hidden because she's a child. It's one of those things where you go from being a child to kind of starting to think about being an adult. Of course, Juliet's mom saying, do you think you can marry Paris, the County Paris, shows us that mom no longer thinks of Juliet as a little girl. Thinks of her more as an adult. What does dad think of Juliet as? What did he say? He sees her still as this little girl, right? So interestingly, dad has a different view of this wedding thing than mom does. Note, interestingly, in this scene, who is absent. We have in the scene no mention at all from either Rosaline or Paris. Shakespeare is not interested in those people. He is interested in, of course, this famous get together on the dance floor kind of thing. All right, here we go. Let's follow. We're going to begin with some comedy, a couple of service guys serving people, and then we'll get right into the exchange back and forth.
He hopes not to take away. He shoot the trencher, he scrape the trencher.
We will manage to lie all in 1 or 2 minutes, and they are washed to in a foul thing.
Follow it closely. Follow it closely. I need focus.
Save me a piece of margarine. As thou love me, let the porter let in Susan Grindstone and Nell. Anthony, already? Unlooked for and called for, asked for and sought for in the great chamber.
Get up for here and there. Up cheery boys, be brisk a while and the lumbering ladies that have their toes unplagued with corns will walk back with you. Ah, my mistresses, which of you all will now deny to dance? She that makes dainties, she, I'll swear, hath corns. Have I come near ye now? Welcome, gentlemen. I have seen the day that I have worn a visor and can tell a whispering tale in a fair lady's ear, such as would please. Oh, 'tis
gone, 'tis gone, 'tis gone. You are welcome, gentlemen. Come, musicians, play. Ahole, give room and put it, girls. More lights, you ladies, and turn the tables up, and quench the fire. The room is grown too hot. Sir, this unlooked for sport comes well. It's simply you and I are past our dancing days. How long is now since last Joseph and I were in the bar?
My lady, 30 years.
What meant is not so much, 'tis not so much.
Says I'm an old fart. How long's it been?
Completely cost as quickly as it will, some 25 years, and then we part.
'Tis more. His son is elder, sir. His son is 30.
But you told me that his son was but a 4 2 years ago.
What ladies then, which doth enrich the hand of yonder knight?
Here we go. Follow it.
Oh, she that teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night as a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear. Beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear. So shows a snowy dove, trooping with crows, as yonder lady or her fellow shows. The measure done, I'll watch her place of stand, and touching hers, make blessing my rude hand. If my heart left around, forswear its sight, for I ne'er saw true beauty till this night.
Yes, my dear boy, should be a Montague. Fetch me my rapier, boy. What? Dares the slave come hither, covered with an antique face, to fleer and scorn at our solemnity? Now, by the stock and honor of my kid, to strike him dead, I thought it not safe.
Now, Kinsman, why more storm you, sir?
Uncle, this is a Montague, our foe, a villain, that is hither come in spite to scorn at our solemnity this night.
Young Romeo?
Tis he, that villain, Romeo.
Villain.
Has let him alone. Bears him like a portly gentleman. And to say truth, Verona brags of him to be a virtuous and well-governed youth. I would not for the wealth of all this town here in my house do him disparage. Therefore be patient, take no note of him. It is my will, which if you respect, show us their presence and put off these frowns, and ill-beseeming semblance for a feast. It fits, when such a villain is a guest. I'll not endure him. Help me in. But what I say, go to. Am I the master here whom you go to? Do not endure him, God shall mend my soul. You'll make a mutiny among my guests. You will set cock a hoop. You'll be the man. Why, God is
Tells him to shut up. Stand down.
This treacherous escape. The one who must declare the name. Marriage is time. Well said, my heart. What a pretty cost. Oh, red. More lights, more lights. Make them fire. What? Cheer in my heart. Patience folks with willful choler beating makes my flesh tremble in their different greeting. I will withdraw, but this intrusion shall, now seeming sweet, convert to bitterest gall.
It's like Shakespeare doesn't want the audience to miss it. So he's going to put Tybalt on the floor, and notice what Tybalt just said. I'll let this go, but not for long. In other words, I'm going to get this guy. Of course, what's ironic is what?
He kills him.
In the end, Tybalt doesn't kill Romeo. Tybalt kills who? He does. He kills Mercutio. It is in the killing of Romeo's best pal that Romeo then has to respond. So what's the irony? The irony is Tybalt says, you're going to get yours from me, but ultimately, this young kid, Romeo, will be the cause of Tybalt's own death. See how that works? And there's all kinds of ironies that will go on. Now, we're going to stop now and come back tomorrow to look at this comment on the dance floor. Is it true guys have the ability to convince girls to do things just by the way they talk? Is that true? And why are guys such good talkers? And why are girls so willing to listen to their talking? Interesting.